Hello, this is Robert Brown with the Kentucky Valley Educational Cooperative, and we're welcoming you to this Digitalacha podcast. To remind you, Digitalacha was developed by KVEC to inspire creativity and enable educators to network in real time and share professional learning experiences that ensure equity, access, and opportunity for all in our remote rural areas, regardless of zip codes. All learners, children and adults alike, have individual needs and must be provided equitable opportunities for learning that enable them to succeed both academically and socially. And we invite you to see all the great things of Digitalacha by go visiting theholler.org. And I'm very happy to have a co-host today, Dr. Jennifer Carroll. She's our professional learning lead with KVEC. And we have another conversation. We've had a conversation with him before, but now with the podcast, we have Raymond R.J. Rodriguez with the licensing specialist with the Hawaii Teacher Standards Board. So welcome to the podcast, and we're glad you could join us today.
Thanks for having me.
First of all, just tell us a little bit about yourself, your role, the organization there in Hawaii.
Yeah, so my name is RJ Rodriguez. I'm a licensing specialist, as you said, for the Hawaii Teacher Standards Board. We are the authority for licensing teachers, librarians, school counselors in our state. And we are a relatively small organization. There's about 8 of us. And we have responsibilities for licensing all of the teachers in our state, as well as teachers from out of state. Just to give a rough context, we have about 13,000 public school teachers, and then we have private school as well, public and charter school, and then private school as well. We have, about 37 schools, high schools, and we have, 37 charter schools. And so it kind of gives you an estimate about the amount of students, over 200 something schools for public school. And then of course there's the private schools as well. We have 15 preparation programs that our board has authorized to prepare teachers. And just one other layer of context, we have in our state about 1,000 vacancies in public and charter schools every year.
Yeah.
However, in the 15 programs that we have preparing teachers, we only have about 500 that are actually prepared at the end of each year. So, you do the math, you could figure there is a lot of, training and preparation that still needs to be done outside of that. So I didn't mean to make that a commercial for people to come and teach in Hawaii, but we do need great teachers, and our board has state law that authorizes us also as a professional development group, that we are responsible for providing quality professional development for educators in Hawaii. So along that line, our licensing specialists take on different roles as well. So we are responsible for licensing, but we also take on special projects. And my special project has been the Model Code of Ethics for Educators.
Okay, yeah. And we recently had a podcast with the Model Code of Ethics.
Right.
So we had Troy Hutchinson and Marie Fenton with us prior. So I have noticed that Jennifer has looked away. Now what she's doing is she's making her flight reservations to Hawaii. I'm filling out her application as we speak, because I saw her eyes light up.
Yeah. Well, let's get you licensed as a teacher in Hawaii first. Let's do that. Let's get you applying for a license.
So, you talk about the work with the teacher prep in your schools, and you think about Hawaii and reaching out. And I know there are really huge pockets of rural educators in Hawaii.
Right.
Sometimes you don't think about that, but I know that there are. And in this time of COVID or any other time, you start looking at the virtual learning needs and how we get the information to the students, how we get the information to our teachers. So what are some of the things happening with your agency, with other agencies there, to meet this need for virtual learning?
Yeah, so I mean, like you said, we do have some geographical limitations in our state. Having major islands that the schools are all spread out across, as well as teachers and families. We already, for years now, have had a responsibility of providing professional learning for all islands as one state. We're a little bit unique in the sense that our state is a one district, so everybody falls under one state Department of Education for public and charter schools. So what we've done in the past is we've done a lot of virtual webinars. We've done a lot of virtual meetings. In the past, prior to COVID, we were taking flights and going to see those teachers in the different islands. So now we need to kind of readjust and have more virtual presentations. And the thing that's kind of nice about that is that now that everybody needs to do these virtual types of meetings, it doesn't get looked at as, so we're on Oahu, and that's the island that is the most heavily populated, most urban. And there is a tendency that people do think that Oahu or a lot of agencies are Oahu centric, where things are done for the people on Oahu in terms of educators, and then the neighbor islands are a second thought. So it's kind of forcing everybody to rethink that and have everything that's kind of uniform, that it's one webinar for everybody in the state, instead of we're going to do a face-to-face meeting with people here, and then we're going to have to do something virtual for the people in neighbor islands. So it's nice in a sense that it's bringing a little bit more equity in that sense, that it's kind of forcing us all to rethink how we reach out to people, how do we connect. So in terms of what we're doing, there's the PD that we created just before COVID was a PLC of all virtual, where you have reflections that you are interacting with people across the state. And we normally have written reflections, but this PD course offered recorded reflections. So video reflections, which is really nice. It was something new, because we knew the need to see people, right? And you needed that. So we're going to continue with that, trying to make things as much as possible, trying to see faces and make those connections, and being really intentional with making those connections.
So do you see within that work, and this is just kind of follow up with the across the islands, that the networking is expanding across those islands? Is that starting to develop?
I think there's an openness to that. I think there's, because you're forced to. I think people are looking all over the place for resources. I think they trust local resources above all, because they know that local resources are created for a specific population. So I think people like our agency and other people that are professional learning providers are kind of at a place where there's a need out there, and so they are, instead of just trying to hustle and get people to take the professional learning, they actually can create something, and people are hungry for that learning. So that's kind of a nice change to this as well.
Yeah, I would see that would have to be. So when you think about that networking and the change in your PD through virtual, you think about your higher ed prep having to reach out to potential educators, you think about teachers working with students. Let's take COVID off the table and some of the lessons learned and things that you're seeing. What do you think will stick, and how do you think some of this virtual learning will change the face of education for you guys? I know there's some things happening here that we say we need to continue with this because this works well. What are you seeing?
Well, I see a lot of educators kind of going back to those binders from their university days and their preparation program days, and re-looking at what are those teaching methods that we learned about. And so instead of having this textbook and this script that that our district is asking us to use, we have to go back to those methods we learned about. How do we engage learners? And that's what I think is sticking, and that's what I think is working in these virtual environments. Is the simple things like what's the hook that you're going to use to connect them into the learning? How are you building the relationships with those learners? Because the virtual opportunities that are not working, a lot of it can be attributed to maybe you don't have a connection with that person, or maybe that person's needs are not being met. So going back to like the Marzano and the, all the different needs of people, and Piaget, and thinking about all those methods and theories that we know, those are the things that are sticking. Those are the things that are still universal and timeless, is how do we connect those to virtual environments? And I think virtual is here to stay. I think the idea of being able to make connections with people, and then giving them that opportunity to go further on their own at their own pace, is something that was being pushed to the forefront pre-COVID. There was a lot of really great reports about. There was the report put out by the Mirage. I'm sorry, I think it was called the Mirage, about evaluating professional development across the nation, right?
Yeah, that was
And
TNTP.
TNTP, thank you.
Yeah.
And it talked about how we really need to have a lot more on-demand learning. And so I think we were kind of going that direction prior to COVID. I think COVID kind of just forced us to do it now. So I think we were headed there. And I think that type of concept, the on-demand learning, asynchronous learning, will stay there. But I think we're still going to need to have those old theories that we learned in our methods courses. How are you connecting with the learners? For example, micro-credentials that we've talked about, the three of us before. Micro-credentials are great. It's a great structure. It's a great format. But it's not deep learning until you add that the PLC, the professional learning community aspect to it. Right. So I think there'll be a lot of like mixing and matching. One thing that I was kind of reflecting on before this this conversation was that I think people are trying to create these menus of learning, right? These like a la carte. I think we're going to have to always have these options for people to kind of choose your own adventure. But I think we'll also have to have these kind of curated collections for people as well. So I think that's what's going to be the lasting effect, is this variety that you're going to have to be able to offer people.
So since you've brought up micro-credentials, we've had several podcasts where we have talked about micro-credentials as providing that opportunity for clinical professional learning, and not that it's, the next best thing to face-to-face professional learning, but it truly is a high quality option for schools and districts and educators to consider as part of a system of professional learning. So just kind of digging into how is the Hawaii Teacher Standards Board, or maybe other agencies within the state of Hawaii, thinking about micro-credentials for educators?
So I know our agency is trying it out with this next professional development course. We were using a program, an online program for educator ethics, that was a very packaged program last school year, and it is being discontinued. So it kind of forced us into this idea of, well, we're still responsible for offering something. And we were made aware of the micro-credentials courses or stack that is connected to educator ethics. So the way we're thinking about doing it is integrating it into our course. Our course is for professional development credit for in-service teachers. And the way we're integrating it is, it is a requirement to be able to complete these artifacts that are in the micro-credential. And that's one part of the professional development. And that is being scored as very, summative type of assessment. However, there's also formative assessment that needs to be done along the way in these PLCs. So we're looking at it as more of a summative type of thing. However, the PLC is kind of, helping you along the way. And integrating formative assessment to support that summative assessment is the way we're looking at it.
Right. So that's interesting that, you're looking at it connected to the model code of ethics right now. and you mentioned earlier the gap that you have in job vacancies versus qualified applicants. Do you see maybe a connection to where micro-credentials or other types of competency-based professional learning might come into play, or maybe it already is, in getting people certified for teaching, since you have such a large need for those people in those positions?
Yeah, you know, we've researched this and talked to other agencies about this, and we definitely want to try this out first and see what people say about micro credentials. And this is something that this course that we're doing is being done with some preparation programs as well. So a couple universities are along with this journey. They're going to be looking at this course as well. It's a very interesting concept to them, micro-credentials are. But I think people want to see it and hear what people say first. So we're at a very early stage right now. I think it has potential for being integrated into preparation programs. And I know that our board is going to want to hear what the actual educators say about this concept as well before they weigh in on it as well.
Yeah.
So, but this course is something that comes from our board. So, our board is in favor of using micro credentials. I think we want to see what educators say first before we move further.
And I
Do
think
you
it's
have
important.
any?
Go ahead, Jennifer.
Oh,
Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No,
Do
you
you
go ahead.
have any pockets of folks who are right now you just kind of using micro credentials on their own as ways of, you know, just professional learning around their content or around pedagogy, or just to address needs identified in professional learning plans? Do you see that going on kind of independently of the Teacher Standards Board?
We do. We've already talked to the teachers union in our state. There is only one in our state, and they have a relationship with the National Education Association, NEA, and they receive monthly reports of who in our state is using micro-credentials, because they have quite a large library of micro-credentials, and they're seeing a lot of people using them. So what we're not seeing is a large amount of people finishing the micro-credentials. And so that's part of the reason why we saw it important to integrate a PLC with the micro-credential, I guess, structure for it to be deep learning, right?
Yes.
So we're seeing a lot of people starting. So that's the trend that we're seeing in our state. We're seeing a lot of people starting it. I've talked with people that have tried it out, and they like the structure of it. They like the concept that it's competency based, but just not a lot of people finishing. So,
you know, it makes me think, you know, KVEC has developed, we still have 2 more to go, but a stack of micro credentials around teaching rural students of poverty. And, you know, that's very applicable to our part of Kentucky, but I think it might also be applicable to some of the schools in your state as well. And that micro credential is offered on the Digital Promise platform free of charge to educators right now. And it really takes educators through the process of collecting all kinds of information about the students that they serve, and really starting to understand what types of poverty are represented in their classroom and in their schools and in their district, because not all poverty is the same. And then that gives them that launch point then to start to have conversations about, you know, once we know our students and we know what their circumstances are, we can start to build those relationships, which we know then lend itself more to engagement when we're able to reach those students, you know, directly around those things that they have interest in, passions in, things that help meet their needs. Then we can develop engaging instruction. So, you know, I don't know if there's an opportunity for us to kind of work with you around that, or with any of the other listeners who listen to our podcast who are also teaching rural students of poverty, but that is a very real issue. And I think it's something when we're talking about equity, we know that there have been inequities in education for years and years and years. But I think the COVID-19 pandemic has really shown a light on some of those inequities and really brought them to the surface where we can't ignore them anymore. We have to address them because our students are they're in need. And so, maybe that's something that your standards board and we can partner in to maybe bring a micro credential that is needed into your state, and folks can maybe partner with Kentucky on that work.
Thank you for that. Yeah, no, from all the presentations KVEC has been doing, it's very clear. I mean, that's why I wanted that conversation with just the two of you, because I really value your work. I value the way that you folks think of micro-credentials. I mean, so going back to when I was telling you about how we're kind of dust off the methods courses, right, from the universities and everything, one of the leaders or educators that I've really admired and tried to base a lot of my work on is Paulo Freire, right? And the idea of listening to what the community needs and being able to help the community see how to move forward, right? And the teacher not really being the one that's just delivering lectures and lectures and lectures, but really being able to see the need and then react to what the needs are, along with helping them think critically, right? And I think that's one of the things that micro-credentials really allows you to do, as long as you can find those leaders, right? Those people that have that inspiration, and or maybe you need to nudge a little bit to encourage them to see themselves as leaders in their community, in their school, in their classroom. They are the ones that can help design the micro-credential that's needed, right? And that's really what you're talking about. That course really is helping them see the needs in the community and be able to react to help that community, right?
And I think the whole needs-based part of this is so important as we talk about this. And you mentioned some of the teachers aren't completing, and makes me wonder if they're working in a network in isolation. Are they working together on those as they move forward, or are they working by themselves? Do you have any idea about how they're completing?
It's probably by themselves. That's just a guess, because a lot of what we hear from teachers is that the structure of a lot of schools, definitely nowadays, but the structure of a lot of schools is not set up where it's a collaborative environment by design.
Mm-hmm.
It's more of a compliance environment. And I think there are a lot of schools in Hawaii that are moving, pre-COVID, we're moving to this idea of collaboration and teams. I think we're kind of forced to create these teams now and have regular meetings online. That's one of the nice things about all of this, is that even my team, we have daily meetings now. We never had that before. And it's a way that we check in with each other every single day. So we're building that relationship, and that's something that didn't exist prior to COVID.
Yeah.
So I think that schools have that opportunity to build a structure where they are setting up regular meetings and teaming more, working together on projects, collaborating on projects. I think there's a hunger for that among educators. I think they want to know what other educators are doing. You see it on Twitter, you see it on other social media platforms. So that's why people might be tuning into this podcast, right? Is because they want to see what other people are doing. And then, of course, the next step is, how do we connect them with those educators, right?
And I think, and as Jennifer mentioned, in these virtual environments, the connection is so much easier now across. I mean, here we are speaking to you. We're in Appalachia, Kentucky. Speaking, I call it the Pacific Pond. You're in Oahu, and here we are having our second time having this conversation to reach out and have these networks.
Right.
My final thought, and to you from my point of view, you also mentioned the alternative. You have 1,000 job vacancies, only 500 in the pipeline. And I know there's probably a need for alternative teachers in those areas. Are there any conversations from your department or universities, because that partnership with the university is so important, how micro-credentialing could be used to help get teachers in alternative programs that on-demand, quick learning that they need before they go into the classroom? Any conversations there?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
I know that when I do hear about micro-credential stacks, I do make sure that I look at it first and try to kind of skim through and see what other people are saying about it, or what it looks like, what competencies it's hitting. And then I share them with people that I think it might be of value to.
Right.
And I do, every time I share that with people, they're very excited about it. I guess I should be following up with them to see, what have they done with it.
Yeah.
But there's excitement every time a resource is shared. So I know there's interest. I'm very excited to hear. Oh, I'm sorry. So we already have almost everybody registered for the class that I've been talking about, where we're combining micro-credentials with the PLC. It filled up so fast. The class was very, and I put on the front end in the course description, you will be required to complete a micro-credential. So that didn't scare people away. In fact, people signed up, and like I said, there's maybe 2 spots left in the class.
That's great.
So I think there's definitely an interest. I'm not aware of how the state is looking at using it moving forward. I know that, like I said, every educator I share this with, every principal I share this with, they're interested in it though.
Yeah, and that's being due to the process. I think we had the same thing as we began. What, Jennifer? How long has it been now? 4 years ago.
Yeah.
Okay, so
6 months ago.
6 months. Yeah, seriously. Yeah, time has been flying by. But do you have any thoughts or comments, Jennifer or RJ, before we close off today's podcast?
No, I just think it's interesting to talk to people who are just pursuing different ways that micro-credentials can be used to help educators to, really focus on the needs of the students rather than just, that would be a nice thing to learn, and moving toward, this is something that we really have to learn in order to move our students forward. So it's just refreshing to talk to folks that are thinking about that, and to hopefully continue to connect around this work, and maybe share some of the micro-credentials that we have been developing, share some of those models that we are working on about engaging teachers in the development of micro-credentials to meet those needs. So maybe we can just continue to have our conversations with RJ and anyone else who is interested.
Hey, RJ, you just put something up in chat. Tell us.
Yeah, so I wanted to, sorry, I didn't want to, I hope it didn't come up on the screen and interrupt Jennifer's.
It didn't.
Okay, good. All right. I think just kind of my biggest takeaway is that PD, and moving into this role as a licensing specialist, I was a teacher for a while, elementary, middle, and high school. And moving into this role, I just really hope PD can be looked at as engagement instead of just compliance. And that's what I think a lot of it has been in the past. How many continuing ed credits do I need, or continuing ed units do I need so I can renew, right? But I hope it can be looked at more as engagement. And like you were saying, Jennifer, created alongside and presented by educators. I think the most, I guess, valuable or credible voice to an in-service educator is other in-service educators, and saying, look, this is something that worked. And this is how it worked. And I think that is a lot more credible than me at a licensing agency saying, here's a PD that would be really good for your class, right? Because yes, I'm a former educator, I'm still licensed, but I'm not practicing it. I don't see it actually working. So having an educator be the one that delivers this, be a co-facilitator, is extremely valuable. And just one last thing, there's a lot of virtual conferences nowadays. And we found that prior to COVID, we applied to be a presenter at a conference in October, and we were accepted. And then all of a sudden COVID happened, and they said, well, it's going to be virtual. We want you to do asynchronous learning. So what they meant by asynchronous learning was a 20-minute recorded presentation. Not exactly asynchronous learning. But I encourage people to, if you're going to do a presentation, try to find ways, the technology out there is so amazing. Try to find ways to make your recorded presentation something that can be engaging. And I put a link in the chat on how we approach that. So that's a 20-minute recorded presentation that I'm hoping can be seen as something engaging. Just a format that could be used, that we're going to be using in our class that's going to be part of the PLC environment as well.
Okay, we'll put that link in our summary comments and have that up there ready. And if someone wanted to get in touch with you directly, because you're just starting out and there may be other folks starting out, how would they get in contact with you to further this conversation?
Yeah, I just, I'm starting out with MicroCredentials, but I just started being a licensing specialist as well. It's a little bit more than a year now, so I'm very, very happy to be doing this work, and I'd love to get in touch with other people interested in this. Doesn't have to be a licensing specialist, educators in general. I'll send you my contact information, but email is best. I have a link if anybody ever wants to schedule a web conference and just talk about these things. Anybody trying out professional development in new ways, I'd love to collaborate or learn from you. And we are creating a website that is going to be dedicated completely to educator ethics. It will have a Hawaii feel to it, but it's a public website, so I'll make sure that once that's published, we'll let you folks know as well.
That's awesome. I think this is a great opportunity for this network to grow, and hopefully with our Digital Lecture podcast, that's what we're wanting to do, is to grow a national network, to have these conversations and link people together as best as we can. So on behalf of the Kentucky Valley Education Cooperative, we want to thank our special guest, Raymond Rodriguez, or RJ, I'm sorry. We really appreciate talking to you, and it's always a pleasure, and hope to have these continued conversations, and we hope to catch you on the next podcast.